I kind of feel a little bit like, what's her name? Can't even remember her name. She's dating the football player.
Or Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift. I'm the male version of Taylor Swift.
Well, good morning. Great to be here, and like the shirt. It's been our second day here. I'm sure I probably met most of you yesterday, and if not, we'll see you today. As soon as we get done here, we're going to go over to the table and continue giving out Cobra clutches and getting new members to the Cobra Clutch Club. So come on over. We had all kinds of things over there, interesting things, photos, action figures, and of course a lot of stories. So we don't just sign things and say goodbye. We spend some time with you. I like to hear you make me young, because I sit at home all week and mow the lawn and do those troublesome things, and then I get on an airplane and come and visit all the fans of wrestling and G.I. Joe and all the other little things that I've dabbed into over my career. So I always like to see where everybody's from. Maybe they weren't born here, but they're here now, and find out where they grew up, and so I can kind of tell what the style of wrestling they watched and who I may have wrestled at that time, and of course with the G.I. Joe, two entities that are, I'm the only human, actually, I don't know if you probably heard this at the table if you were there, that has both these rings.
Yeah.
I have a WWE Hall of Fame and I have a G.I. Joe Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I'm the only one that has those two rings, so that's a pretty good feeling when you go to do these appearances and meet your fans, and some are all the way, wrestling and G.I. Joe. Some are just wrestling, some are just G.I. Joe. Teen Titans Go, I don't know if you've watched that. I've done Dr. Military on that. I did the voice. I couldn't be Sergeant Slaughter, so they said, how about Dr. Military and be the villain? And I said, yeah, that's what I love to do. I'll be the villain. So we're hoping to do some more episodes of that, Teen Titans Go. Of course, I've done lots of crazy things. I did tug of wars with Bigfoot, the monster truck. My arms are a little bit longer these days. But that just happened. We were at a show, a Bigfoot monster truck show in Hartford, Connecticut, and they asked me, since I lived in Connecticut, could you come and do the Pledge of Allegiance, and when they do the national anthem, could you be out on the dirt floor there? And I said, sure, I'll do that. So I did my bit, and of course the star of the show was Bigfoot. So here he came, and went all around the hockey rink there. It was in a hockey rink with dirt instead of ice, of course. And so all of a sudden, Bigfoot is coming at me slowly, and I had nowhere to go. So I just jumped up on the hockey board there. There was no glass on it. So I just stood there and I thought, well, might as well go for it. So I leaped off the board and hit the hood of Bigfoot's truck. And the driver made the truck go backwards. and the people went crazy. They thought that I actually gave an elbow smash to the monster truck, Bigfoot, and made it go backwards. So when I got back in, the promoter of the event goes, that was incredible. We got to do something. I said, what, I'm going to go give Bigfoot an elbow every night? No, I don't think that's going to sell a whole lot of tickets. He said, no, you got to do something. We got to do something. So I came up with the idea of man versus machine. Back in those days, we all still had our good jobs and worked hard, and machines were starting to make their way to take our jobs away from us. So I said, I'll do something in man versus machine. So I went, the first time we did it was in Tucson, Arizona. And I went to a local gymnasium, Gold's Gyms, and 3 or 4 of them, and I brought a bunch of camouflage shirts and Sergeant Slaughter shirts and a dashboard where he could pull this lever and the oil would go onto the tires. And the more he got the tires going, he would put the car or the truck in it. And he'd be like sliding all over the place, and the smoke was flying out the back of those tires. And people actually thought we were holding it, you know, and we would just kind of sway it, and we would work out a 2 out of 3 fall tug of war match. So we did that for about 32 or 34 shows, and just had a great time with it. So you just never know what you're gonna end up doing some days.
Did you know it was going to become as big as it did when it started?
Well, you know, it was always considered the major league.
Yeah.
It was the WWF at that time, Worldwide Wrestling Federation. And I had started my career in 1972-73. And in 1979, I was wrestling in Minnesota, AWA, as Super Destroyer Mark II. I had begun the Sarge. The Sarge started in 1974-75, but then my mother got sick, so I had to quit wrestling and go back to Minnesota and help my father run his roofing company. So I couldn't really do much. So one day the local promoter there, Vern Gagne, asked me if there was any possible way that I could go over to Hawaii for 6 weeks because they needed a mask wrestler. And I said, gee, Vern, I don't know if I can do that because I got to take care of my dad's company. So I was telling my mother and father about it at dinner, and my mother said, you know, I'm not dying tomorrow. Somebody's offering you 6 weeks in Hawaii, I think you should probably go. And she said, everything's fine here. You just go ahead and go. So I went over and became the executioner and wrestled Rick Martel most of the time I was there. And when I got back, Vern Gagne said, what's this I hear you're the greatest masked wrestler of all time? And I said, well, I don't know about that. He said, well, if Ed Francis says you're the promoter over there says you're the number one masked man he's ever seen, you must be. He said, I want to get rid of the guy I've got, Super Destroyer, because he's not doing good business with me. He doesn't want to do this, doesn't want to do that, so I want to get rid of him. And I want to know if he'll do it. And I said, well, I'm under the same situation. I got to take care of my dad's company. So I talked to my dad and mother again. My dad said, well, as long as you can, you know, get the crew going every morning, you know, that was usually about 0400 or 0500 in the morning. And if you can do that and head out and wrestle and be back, I had no problem with it. And I had a friend of mine who was a foreman and he could take care of things. So I gave the okay and became Super Destroyer Mark II. And so when it was time, like about 1979, and I'd had enough of Super Destroyer Mark II, and my mother had passed on by this time. And so I just sent some photos along with Pat Patterson to New York. Vince McMahon Sr. was the owner then of the WWF. And so I went in for a kind of a tryout. So I sat there for 3 tapings, and then finally he came to me and he said, I want you to go out and do a promo with my son. And I said, oh, which one is he? Because I never knew who Vince McMahon Jr. was. And so he said, he's the one out there with the good-looking suit on. And he said, can you imagine that he gets $400 haircuts? I said, what? $400 haircuts? Yeah, that's the kind of ego he's got. And I said, oh, okay. So he said, when the time's ready, I'll have you go out there and do a promo with him. I want to hear Sergeant Slaughter's shtick, you know. He said, before you go out there, is there anything I could do to set up your entrance? So I said, well, I reached in my bag and I got a cassette tape out, and I said, can you play this? And he said, what is it? And I said, that's the Marine Corps hymn. And he said, well, what do you want me to do with it? I said, is there any way you can play the loudspeakers here? And he said, geez, I never thought about having music before, but let me see what I can do. So he takes off, comes back, he said, yeah, the guys in the truck said they can play the music when you go out there. So I said, well, let's give it a shot. He said, geez, I've never thought about that. So let's try it. So I'm waiting and waiting, and Vince McMahon Sr. used to have like 4 quarters, and he would jiggle. It was kind of a nervous thing. So it was time for me to go, and the music starts playing, and it got like, you could hear a pin drop. Everybody's like, what the hell? The Marine Corps hymn playing. And so as I went to walk out, Vince McMahon Sr. put his arm across my path, and he's like just listening to the reaction of the people. And finally he shoved me out the door, and there I was. And I had, of course, my cigar and my whistle, my swagger stick, and I was dressed pretty to the hilt as Sergeant Slaughter. As I started making my way to Vince McMahon Jr., I was calling everybody maggots and scums and slimes and pukes, and telling them to stand up and salute me, and they'd never seen me before in their life. And so they're like, kind of PO'd at me. Who's this guy calling us names and things like that? So anyway, by the time we get to Vince to do the promo, he starts to talk, and I went right up to him just like a DI would, and I said, shut your hole, puke. Who gave you permission to speak? And he stopped and kind of went into character without even knowing he was, because I was marching and I was giving him orders left and right. And finally I walked around him a couple times. I said, get that chin up and that chest out. Of course, he's a big workout guy, so he loved getting that chest out. So I finally went around to him, and I took my swagger stick and I started ruffling up his hair. And he gave me the shoulder, like, don't do that. I don't want you doing that, you know. And so finally I stopped and I yelled right in his ear. I said, who cut your hair? Ray Charles? And he looked at me like, who in the heck is this guy? Insulting me, doing all these things. We'd never met each other. So finally we got all done, and I went to leave. And he was saying, well, maybe we'll be seeing Sergeant Slaughter down the road. And I still had my cigar, and I thought, well, I'll put an exclamation point on it. So I took a big drag of my cigar, and I turned around and I blew it right in his face. And I said, and that's an order, maggot. And he started coughing and choking. And little did I know, he hates smoke. So he was turning all kinds of colors. And he was legitimately hated me. He hated me. And so I walked back and get to the dressing room, and of the guys that were still in the locker room, they're all kind of like laughing, kind of under their breath, like, that poor guy, he got fired before he gets started. And messing around with the boss's kid like that. So taking off my combat boots and got one off, and here I hear the quarters jingling. And I see these loafers going around my chair. Finally they stop in front of me, so I look up, and Mr. McMahon Sr. is looking over me. He's just like shaking his head. Got those quarters going. Gives me one of these, follow me. You know. I did something bad. So I go into this back room, and he's walking around me, the quarters are going, and finally stops right in front of me, right in my face, and I'm ready for this. You're fired, you know. And he goes, that's the greatest character I've ever seen. That's the greatest villain I've ever seen in all of it. He said, I got to have you start tomorrow. Even my son hates you. So I said, well, I'm still wrestling under the mask up in Minnesota. He said, don't worry about it. I'll get you out of that. You got to come to New York. So that's kind of how I got my foot into the WWF at that time. And went in there and had my first match in 1980 with Bob Backlund for the title. And I'd been using the Cobra Clutch. In New York at that time, all you did was television. You never did any arenas. You just did television. And you would beat everybody in sight. Of course, I was beating everybody with the Cobra Clutch, and the announcer were going, boy, Bob Backlund better look out for Sergeant Slaughter. He gets that Cobra Clutch on and the title's the Sergeants, you know. So that's how they built it up. And so in Madison Square Garden, my first night wrestling in the WWF at that time in Madison Square Garden. Wow. Can you imagine that? I'm sitting in a locker room and I'm thinking, all the famous people that have sat right here where I'm sitting, you know, singers and hockey players, basketball players, all these, even some famous dogs, you know. Yeah. They have the dog show there. But anyway, I just was overwhelmed. I couldn't believe that I'm sitting in Madison Square Garden. So time to have the match, and I got little by little, I ended up manager who was Arnold Skolin, and Arnold was a former Marine. Well, there's not anything such as there's no former Marine. He was a Marine, and we used to call him Gunny. And Vince McMahon Sr. loved Arnold, and he always would give me a little, go do that to, go give Arnold a hard time. Give Arnold a hard time. And so Arnold was that tough, gunny guy. And so right before I put the Cobra Clutch on Bob Backlund, I reached out and slapped Arnold across the face, knocked the cigar out of his mouth. And so I get the Cobra Clutch on Backlund, and he's about ready to give up, and here comes Arnold over the top rope and hits me over the head with a chair and gets Bob Backlund disqualified. And I'm going, no, no, Jesus, I ruined the whole thing, you know. So I won the match, but I didn't win the title because of the disqualification. So get back to the dressing room, and Mr. McMahon Sr., geez, that was great, you're the best, blah, blah, blah. He had those people going, and he said, unfortunately, Bob Backlund has to be in Japan for the return, so we can't have it the next show that's available at the Garden. I said, what? Oh, God. What are we going to do? He said, well, I'll find you a suitable opponent. I think I have somebody. And I said, who? And I've been waiting to hear this name. He goes, Bruno Sammartino. And I went, what? My second match in Madison Square Garden is going to be with Bruno Sammartino? No way. You're going to kill me. So anyway, Bruno and I had this match while Bob went to Japan. And that was actually Bruno's last match at Madison Square Garden. He retired after that. He wrestled a few times with his son in some tag matches, but never a single again. So that was always a little, you know, medal on my chest that I had Bruno's last match. And boy, we tore the house down. He was a go. He didn't stop. He was like an Ultimate Warrior type character. He just never stopped moving. But that's how I got into the WWF, and then of course Vince McMahon, his son took over, and they turned it to the WWF, World Wrestling Federation. And little by little, I had to finally leave. Vince came to me and said, I want you to leave for a while. I said, did I do something wrong? He said, no, you're doing everything great. I just don't want you to get overexposed your first time in. So if you can find a spot to go, you can go to Charlotte. I can get you into Charlotte. I said, okay, I'll go to Charlotte. So then I went down to Charlotte for a while and teamed up with Don Kernodle and I had won the U.S. title, NWA U.S. title twice there. And finally it was time to go back. I got the call from Vince McMahon Senior. He was still kind of running the company, and said, I need you to come back. I want you to come back. So I went back, and first night, three matches at the TV, and we went out afterwards. And Vince and his son and Pat Patterson, a couple other guys, and we're sitting around having dinner, and Vince McMahon Senior said, it's so good to have you back, Sergeant. He never called me Sarge or Bob or Robert. It's always Sergeant. Sergeant, it's so good to have you. You're the greatest villain of all time. And, always. And I said, well, it's good to be back, Mr. McMahon, but if you think I'm such a great villain, you ought to see me as a hero. And he went, what? Sergeant Slaughter is a hero? No way. What are you talking about? You can never be a hero. Maybe for a couple shows, but what do you get, money? I said, well, I've been looking at the situation. You get the Iron Sheik from Iran. I said, Ayatollah Khomeini. Nobody ever really got to punch that son of a... Nobody ever got to punch him right in the nose for all that he did. The Black Hawks going down, the killing all the Marines at the embassy, the hostage situation. I went through I had it all figured out. And I laid it all out to him. And he was like, I almost hypnotized him. He's like, yeah, you're right. And then he snapped out of me. He goes, but that was good, Sergeant. But no, you gotta stay the villain. And I look over his shoulder of his son, who's taking over the company, and he's like, and I look over Senior's shoulder, and I see Junior go like this, and Senior turns around. I said, Vinny, don't you ever take Sergeant and make him the hero. Don't do it. I said, okay, Pop, let's go. Off they went. 3 weeks goes by, and there we are. We're in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I wrestle as the villain. Then I do a promo in the next hour, and then the last hour I'm not even scheduled. I'm taking my clothes off, my uniform off, and here comes, right before the third hour, here comes Vince Jr. And he goes, are you ready, Sarge? And I said, ready? Yeah, born ready. What do you want? He said, I want to do it. I'm going to do it now. I said, do what now? He says, what you told my dad 3 weeks ago about the Iron Sheik. And I said, oh, you want to do that? He said, yeah. I said, when? He said, now. I said, what do you mean now? He said, right now. There's going to be a couple of matches on, and then I'm going to send the Iron Sheik out, and I want you to go out and confront him. But I'm not telling the Iron Sheik. I'm not telling Freddie Blassie, who was his manager, going by Ayatollah Blassie. I don't know if any of you remember any of this, but he said, the only people that are going to know about this is you, me, and the truck, because they have to put your music up, so they have to know you're coming. I said, okay. And he said, and one other thing, when you go out there and confront him and challenge him, I want you to do your greatest General Patton promo. General Patton. And back then we didn't have scripts. Everything was ad lib. So I'm trying to find my gear, because I've already gotten out of my gear. I can't find my campaign cover because one of the aides took it away from the ring and put it somewhere. So I get a baseball cap on, and I'm getting ready to go out there, and I'm watching the monitor. So I put the baseball cap on, and I'm waiting for the music to play. And Iron Sheik is beating the heck out of this poor guy. Eddie Gilbert was his name. And he beating him, and finally got him in the camel clutch and ringing the bell, and he wouldn't stop, and the Marine Corps hymn started playing. And everybody just kind of like stopped, and we're like, yeah. Yeah, the Marines are coming, So out to the curtain I come, and I started, on the Iron Sheik. Of course, they didn't know what was going on. They weren't told that I was coming out there. So right before I went out, I was watching the monitor. As soon as my music played, I could read their lips. The Iron Sheik and Fred Blassie are going, wrong music. Wrong music. They thought the Iron Sheik should have had some music, but the Marine Corps playing is Marine Corps anthem is playing, and so they were like, what in the heck is going on? So we got everybody surprised. The element of surprise is what always worked in my business, in our entertainment business. But that's how I became I went from the villain 1 hour, and the next hour I was like the greatest hero of all time. People couldn't get enough of me. They just got done spitting on me, kicking me, yelling at me, biting me, screaming at me, throwing stuff at me to slaughter, USA, USA. So little by little, the next time I come to television, back to Allentown 3 weeks later, there's like canvas bags. There's like 8 or 10 canvas bags lined up. I got there early because by this time things have already been rolling, and people were just couldn't get enough of Sergeant Slaughter. And so the aides, I said, what's all that stuff? He said, oh, that's yours. I said, mine? What do you mean that's mine? He goes, that's fan mail. That's fan mail. And I said, oh my gosh. So I started going through a bag, and people were sending me utility caps and uniforms and medals and pictures of their dads and their family in the military, and could you sign this? And, send them money, and go get the Iron Sheik. And so that's how I became the superhero. And of course, a little company up in Pawtucket, Rhode Island called Hasbro saw that too. So they get in touch with a friend of mine's attorney, my attorney's friend, and had lunch and talked about, what's going on in Hasbro these days. Oh, we're doing this and do that. This guy happened to be head of G.I. Joe line. And he said, we're kind of looking to go in a different direction. And he said, oh yeah, where are you heading? So we want to find a real live character. We've always been animated. One guy will do 5, 6 voices of different characters. But we want to find a real guy. And he said, you ever thought of Sergeant Slaughter? He said, that's who we've been talking about. That's all we've been talking about all morning. Sergeant Slaughter, other Sergeant Slaughter. And he said, you know how to get a hold of him? He said, yeah, my friend's his attorney. He said, well, give him a call. So, long story short, I went to Hasbro's offices in Pawtucket, had my camouflage limousine, and just as we got to the offices, I told my driver to stop. I got out, got in the trunk, and I put 2 American flags on the fenders. And I said, drive as slow as you can around about 3 or 4 blocks here. When it's time, I'll tell you to head up into the office there. So he did. And so it was like the Pied Piper. People were coming out of the restaurants, the stores, the dry cleaners, beauty shops, and they're following my camouflage limo. And we pull up into the Hasbro's main offices there. And of course, I had a camouflage sports coat on and dressed to the hilt. And as I get out, I look into the glass offices, and I see all these men going crazy like little kids. And they're like, yeah. And so I turn and I walk in, and they all kind of went into, the business character. How you doing? All right. Weren't you the guy that just saw going, yo. So we went into this big boardroom, and we had to conversation, and they finally told me what they wanted, what they're looking for. So I said, well, I'll give it some thought, and I got up to leave, and I turned around, and they're all kind of like, geez, we were hoping he's just going to say yeah. So I turned around, I stopped, and I said, if you're looking for the real G.I. Joe, I'm him.
Yes, sir.
So when you want to talk to me again, this is my attorney, here's his card, you know. So we drive back about halfway, we're kind of hungry, pull over. Back then we didn't have cell phones. My attorney said, I better go check the payphone and get my messages. He comes back, he was kind of like grayish. He goes, they've called 4 times since we left. They want you to be their first living G.I. Joe. And I said, really? Oh, that's good. So I couldn't wait till next time I did TV, and I saw Vince McMahon Jr. now, who's our leader of today, I think. I'm not sure where he's at these days, but I couldn't wait to tell him what I had in my pocket. And I said, I went to Hasbro and this, and I told the whole story. And he listens to me, and he pats me on the back, and he said, that's good, kid, but I can't let you do it. I said, what? What do you mean you can't let me do it? He said, I just signed with LJN last week, and they're our toy company. And it would be a conflict of interest if you were with Hasbro and LJN. It won't work. I said, what do you mean it won't work? It's a cross. That's right. That's G.I. Joe. This is wrestling, you know. No, that's the way it is. But keep up the good work. Thanks for trying. I said, wait a minute. So we started, you know, having a tough time with that. So finally, one night, I was having dinner with my wife and my 2 daughters, and my wife said, what's troubling you? You don't seem to be yourself. So I've got this big decision to make. WrestleMania 1 is going to be coming, and Vince wants Hulk Hogan and I to wrestle Roddy Piper and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff for the first WrestleMania. She said, oh, good, that's great. She said, what's wrong with that? I said, well, G.I. Joe wants me to come and be their first living G.I. Joe, but Vince won't let me do it. I said, I don't know what to do. She said, well, that's a pretty easy answer. And I said, what do you mean that's an easy answer? She said, you can always be a wrestler. You can't always be the first living G.I. Joe. And I said, that's why you get the big bucks. That's why you get the big bucks. So I called Vince the next day and gave him my notice. Said, I'm leaving. He said, no, you're not. You can leave after WrestleMania. I said, no, they want me to come now. Well, you can't be at both places. You can either be there or you can be here. What do you want to do? And he figured I would say, I'll stay. But I went. So that became a real problem. And for 6 years, we went through that whole year we went through some big, major problems. But I got to where I didn't even want to watch the WWF at the time. Didn't even want to watch it because it made me mad. And so I didn't even watch the first 6 pay-per-views. Just stayed away from it. I went and wrestled for the AWA, who allowed me to promote G.I. Joe. So I went and got TV airtime there. And most of the other time I had to do it on my own, the indies and all that kind of thing. So, but anyway, that's where it all was battling. And my contract is finally up with Hasbro. Did about 7 years with them, and not quite 7. And so I was in a hotel in Cleveland, Ohio, and I noticed they were promoting pay-per-view. You could get pay-per-view in your room, and the main pay-per-view was WrestleMania 6. And I said, maybe I'll give it a try. I'll watch it. So I called down, get it hooked up for me. So I went down, I had some dinner, came back up, and it was already going. And just as I started watching it, Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior were having their match in Toronto, Canada. And I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, when I looked at that screen and saw that look I went, oh my gosh, I've never seen anything like it. It looked like 100 million people were in that arena. And there were camera shots here. When I left WWF, we had maybe 3 cameras that we worked to. Now there's like 20 cameras. Booms, and all kinds of, I'd never seen this before, you know. And I'm just like, my mouth has dropped open. I couldn't believe the look of it. So I saw the match. I got a pencil and paper out of the drawer of the hotel desk there, and I, dear Vince, just watched your WrestleMania 6 match show. I salute you, sir, for the magnificent production that I just witnessed. And I went on and on about the production. And then I cited Sarge. Then I put P.S. the match between Warrior and Hogan, and I put 2 big letters, P.U. and stuck it in an envelope, sent it off, and about 2 weeks later I'm watching a NASCAR race at home, kind of dozing off, and the phone rings. And I said, hello? Sarge? Yeah. Vince? Oh, hey Vince, how you doing? He said, I got your letter, got your note. I wanted to thank you very much for your input. We've been working very, very hard to make our production the best in the world. And I said, well, you did that. You've done that. I went through the whole thing. I haven't watched your show in 6 years, but I'm going to watch it again. He said, well, I see your contract's up with Hasbro. I said, oh, you know that? He goes, that's my business, Sarge. I need to know those things. He said, are you ready to go back to work? I said, yeah, I'm ready. He said, well, meet me at my house tomorrow morning. So, gather up with my family again for dinner. Guess where I'm going tomorrow? Where? I'm going to Vince McMahon's house. He wants me to come back. Oh. And I said, he's probably going to take G.I. Joe Sergeant Slaughter and make him the real American hero like only he can do. And I got so excited about it. And my daughters are clapping, my wife is, yay. And so I go off and I see Vince, and it's hard to explain what he and I went through. But when I drove up into his driveway, he had a gated community, and I got in and stopped my car, and before I even got out, here he comes out of the house waiting for me in his workout outfit, and got a coffee, and the coffee, we talked a while, and finally takes me into his library. He's got this figure of the LA Coliseum kind of laid out. He's got big screens here, big screens there. He said, this is WrestleMania 7. LA Coliseum holds 104,000 people. I want to break the Detroit record, WrestleMania 3, with you and Hulk Hogan. And I said, really? Wow. And I said, well, how are you going to make Hulk the villain? And he goes, Hulk? No, I don't want to make Hulk the villain. I want you to be the villain. I said, me? I'm G.I. Joe. He goes, yeah, I know you're G.I. Joe. That's what's going to make it even better. And I said, what do you got in mind? He said, well, I think it may be with all this that's happening over in Iraq, with the hostage, or the overtake of Kuwait and all that's going on, it would be a perfect time for you to come back and say that you're PO'd with your country, with your military. They become weak. They let a little country like Iran and Iraq take over Kuwait and take over the world, and they're controlling the oil and blah blah. You go through this whole thing, and I'm kind of like, I'm starting to hate, you know, the whole situation. Like, yeah, he's right. Now he's kind of getting me hypnotized, you know? And so finally I just said, this is a joke, right? It's a joke. You want me to be an Iraqi sympathizer? He goes, yeah. You want to do it? I said, you want me to get killed? What are you talking about? He says, yeah, it's going to get a little bit pretty rough, but if you don't want to do it, just tell me. I said, well, I'll give it to you. Yeah, I'll do it. Well, why don't you go home and talk to your family about it? Give me an answer in a couple days. You know, we're a year away, so don't rush to any conclusions. I said, okay. So that night, sit down for dinner again with my family. And so how did the meeting go with Vince? I said, he wants me to be an Iraqi sympathizer. My wife said, what? He wants me to be an Iraqi sympathizer. She said, an Iraqi sympathizer? You're G.I. Joe. I said, yeah, I know. She said, you're going to get killed. I said, I know. And she said, well, you're crazy. You can't do that. I said, well, that's what he wants. She said, well, you always made the decision on that character of yours. If that's what you want to do, you go. I said, okay, I'll give it to him. So the next day I called Vince, yeah, I'm doing it. So that's when I became this most hated wrestler again of all time, what we call nuclear heat, where, you know, I had death threats, I had to have armed guards walking around the perimeter of my property, 4 armed guards, 24/7. I could never travel on an airplane with anybody else that was in the business. So what they would do is pick me up at my house and take me to the airport, but I wouldn't go through the terminal. They would take me through a gated area, pull up right under the plane, and they would bring the steps down, and I would climb up on the steps, get on the airplane, and I'd be on the plane before anybody else even got on the plane. So when people would come on, they'd see me sitting there, they go, how did he get on here? You know, because we've been all sitting there waiting to go on, and nobody went on. He's on there. So then they would all get on, and we'd take off wherever we were going. And when we would land, I'd wait for everybody to get off the plane, and then they would drop the stairs down, and I would go down the stairs, and I would take another convoy to either the arena or the hotel, so nobody ever saw me coming or going. And back then we were doing like 2 shows a night, sometimes 3 shows on a weekend a night, and I would always pretty much be on right before intermission, and we'd do our diabolical things, and then I would go back to the dressing room, and while people were getting their refreshments and they were promoting the next show, I was showering, and next match went on, I was gone. I was out of the building already. That's the way we had to do it to protect me. So I had like 4 rental cars destroyed, completely destroyed. So they started driving me around. But before I get too much further into it, the WWE, as you know it now, had to change its name because of the World Wildlife Fund was in England. It has WWF as its 3 letters, and they had it first. So Vince was given a letter that he had to cease from using the WWF. So instead of fighting it over in England, saying I want to use that, he said, I'll just change it to World Wrestling Entertainment and put WWE. And so he made t-shirts. He said, watch this, Sarge. He took t-shirts and said, we were the WWF, but we got the F out. And he sold millions of t-shirts that said that. That's the kind of mind he had. He always knew how to make a dollar here and there. Just in case you wanted to know how the name got changed to World Wrestling Entertainment, that's the story behind it. But I've talked enough. I'm sure you all have some stories or want to ask me a question about a few things.
I wanted to make sure that I didn't want to run over time, but I don't see anyone telling us not to. So who does have a question? I'll open that. Got one?
Well, I was wondering what it feels like to, know that you've touched, many generations. I can ask my grandfather; he knows who Sergeant Slaughter is. I've seen kids run into a store and they picked up a Sergeant Slaughter toy and they're like, "Oh my God, it's Sergeant Slaughter!" Just want to know how that feels. If it's like,
it puts a smile on my heart. I tell you, you all have put a smile on my heart for just by being here today, and all those people that come by, not only yesterday, today, and wherever I do appearances at, but there's nothing quite. It's hard to explain what that's like, but as I said earlier, it keeps me young. When I see children that can't even see over the tables, and can hardly see me, I can see their fingers and they're looking up and they're going, "Sergeant Slaughter." And I'm going, "How do you know who I am?" I'm 75 years old, and I'm, but it's their parents, their aunts and uncles, their grandparents. They're all fans, and it just kind of keeps blossoming. It just keeps going. And last year I re-enlisted with G.I. Joe, and we came out with a figure, and this year we have 2 more figures coming out. One I can kind of tell you about, the other I swore to secrecy. It's going to be a big figure that's going to be coming out. But it's hard to imagine. Like yesterday, I had a young boy. He was so fascinated with my rings, and he kept looking at my rings, wanted me to explain what my rings were. So I told him, and I put them back. I said, "You want to take a picture with my rings?" So we took pictures, and he, "Oh yeah, that's good." So then I took my rings off, and I put them on his fingers. That's the first time I had these rings off since I got them.
Yeah.
The night I got this at Wrestlemania 10, when we were inducted into the Hall of Fame, it hasn't been off my finger that I can remember, unless I had an operation or something. I might have had to take it off.
Yeah.
This one I got from G.I. Joe as the Hall of Fame, and I've never taken that one off either. So first time I'm looking at it, and geez, that really looks. And he was the happiest person in the world. And even my agent said, "I've never seen you take your rings off." But it just something made me. This guy just. When I put those, it was like he was in a fairy tale, in another world. It's just incredible. We sang "Happy Birthday" I had a couple of people request, "Can you sing Happy Birthday to my friend?" So I've sing Happy Birthday in the Sarge voice, and it's a fun time for me. I hate today at 5 o'clock, I'm gonna hate to take my things off for a week and just go out of character. I'm very, very seldom am I ever out of character. People, when I walk down the street, "Hey, Sarge," they don't say, "Hey, Bob," or Rob. "Hey, Sarge." So I'm in character the time I walk out of my house, because my wife will not allow anything of Sergeant Slaughter in our house, in our car, in anywhere. Sarge stays out. He's in the bag wherever he's dumped until I wash it and I go off to the next show. So you'll never ever see me out of character. I'm in character right now. I'm talking to you as Sergeant Slaughter, not Bob Reeves. And I grew up in Minnesota. Mother and father were farmers, and then my father had enough farming, and he started a roofing company. And here we are. Beautiful state of Texas. We were here a couple weeks ago in Houston, and with all the things that were going on with the college football national title, and I mean, the place is rocking. And you get recognized even more when you're, in an area where there's a sporting event going on. And what are you doing in town? What are you doing here? And so I kind of feel a little bit like, what's her name? Can't remember her name. She's dating the football player.
Oh, Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift. I'm the male version of Taylor Swift.
There was a comparison I did not expect to be here today, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so we are actually out of time for the panel, but Sarge is about to head right back to his table. So, I mean, give him a hand. Come on, guys. Come on.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think I can speak for everyone when I say this, Sarge. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being who you are. You are one of the greatest of all time, and just thank you for being here at Retromania.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking your time out.
Thank you.